The sun has left and forgotten me.
Your stories don't define you, but how you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief storymaker at Elkins Consulting. Whether you're sharing business stories or personal stories, the stories you share send signals to your internal messages and externally in how people perceive you. And it's part of why it's so important now more than ever to share our personal stories, not data, not memes, not divisive political commentary, but our stories so that we can connect authentically with the intention of connecting. And today, listeners, you are in for a treat. I've been following Erin Patrice with the Breaking Bread Village for a few months now, and I immediately connected with her and also with a woman right here in Montana in Bozeman that calls herself the Lentil Queen. Both of them feed and nourish and nurture people in large groups to create community, to make introductions, to break bread together. There's a reason that is something that brings people together. And Erin, thank you so much for joining me today on Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate the introduction. I'm so happy to be here with you today. So thank you.
Absolutely. So our listeners will have heard a few stories from Claudia from last week's episode. And I was hoping to get you two together, but our schedules just didn't seem to want to make that happen. As you know, Claudia is dealing with some health issues, and her attitude is great. And I know that she will be back to feeding people and nurturing people very soon. So in the meantime, let's hear something about you that most people don't know, something that's not on your bio or your resume or your LinkedIn profile, so that our listeners get a little bit of context for who you are outside of what they're going to hear about what you do.
Oh, wow. The things people don't know are the things I don't tell. Oh, let me see. Let's see. And I really don't have that much mystery to me. I said that to a little bit of a razzle dazzle, but I don't have much that I really just, I enjoy, I know everyone says I love family time, right? I love spending time with my husband. I love spending time with my children. I love spending time with friends. I'm just really, I think because, and as you may know, if you're a community person where you're always out, I just was at a meeting earlier. We talked about the networking events you have to go to constantly, right? When you do that all the time, you do a lot of small talk, you do a lot of this, you do a lot of that and connecting. You need those downtime, moments where you're just doing nothing, right? I mean, really nothing. Like there's nothing, anything grand to it or, special about it. But I really enjoy, even like now with us being in winter time, I'm not a big winter person, but we've had a lot of sun this year, this winter in Michigan. And I just enjoyed it. I sit right here in my office and I look out. You can see the sun coming in a little bit and I just enjoy that. So, really, people that know me know I love moments of quiet, peace,
solitude.
Yes, because I'm so busy. So when I can have those moments of just breathing, I appreciate those. So
I love that. And that's such an important piece of context for people to know, because I think oftentimes people believe that there's this label of extrovert or introvert. And I don't love labels in general, but I especially don't love those because we're all a little bit of both. There are very few people that are all the way on one end of the spectrum or the other. And what you're describing to me is exactly how most people I know, even the most extroverted of extroverts, need that solitary time to regroup and to be able to have that energy that people expect us to have.
Yeah. Yeah. And depend on, right? People depend on that sometimes, so yeah, you need that time to just kind of recalibrate, process what just happened, right? You have to kind of process that, so you can come back out, kind of refuel to recharge. So yeah.
And learn what you need to learn from whatever the experience was, good and bad.
Yes. Yes.
Especially as an achiever like you need to acknowledge the successes. You need to stop and give yourself that time to own that. Otherwise, you're just on to the next thing right away, and there's no satisfaction in that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Very true. Very true. I'm definitely a breather, right? I'm like, okay, I need to breathe through this and just kind of, I don't know, just look at, like you said, look at it and acknowledge it and be aware of what happened. Say, oh, that was great. That did happen. We did it, and then just breathe through that and then go back to the next. I mean, because you keep going, right? You have to keep doing things. But yeah, yeah.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
That's great. So let's get into story right away, because as you know, the way we tell our stories really helps people understand what we do and what matters to us.
Sure.
So you recently posted about the closing out of a program, and I would love to hear from that event, the closing out, without telling us anything about the program.
Okay.
Tell us about a moment in that ceremony, in that dinner, that you felt a real satisfaction or awe. And the reason I'm asking for awe is that I read the book Awe by Dacher Keltner last year with some friends, and we had a podcast discussion on the topic of awe. And one of the key science pieces behind it is that the more we experience awe, the more open our minds are, the more creative we are, the more likely it is that we're going to connect with other people.
Sure.
And because of what you do in the Breaking Bread Village, I think awe is a really important part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. Without telling anything about the series that we ended, I think the moment of satisfaction or awe for me in that moment was seeing all the people there smiling, right? And then the connection, the energy is more of like something that you kind of palpable, that you can feel. And knowing that we did it, right? I mean, it's something in planning something, having a vision for something, going through all the steps of making sure this happens, but to see it in its totality and at the end say, oh my goodness, we did this, right? Because you have people, not to go too far back, but I mean, people that don't believe that you can do it sometimes, right? I mean, that's a real thing. And so you deal with that, and the sea is kind of ended. You see the balloons, you see the people smiling, you hear the closing music. It's like, oh my goodness, it happened, right? And because when you're in the middle of building, you don't always see that you're building, right? You're just doing things, but at the end, you get to see the finished structure, and it's like, it's here, right? So that was the moment for me. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm like right there with you. Describe the room. How big is it? How many people?
So what's interesting about it is that this is an auditorium space in a library. So it holds probably about, 300 people. We usually have roughly between 70 and 100 people in this space. It's a auditorium space. It has a stage. We have our table. I don't know if you've ever seen like our table settings and what we do. But this particular day was the week that we had the 1 week in Michigan where we had below zero temperatures. And we always know weather can impact attendance, right? So quite honestly, I joked with our team and said, we'll probably just be sitting here talking to each other, and that's okay too. We're still going to do it. And we ended up having probably around 50 to 60 people. I don't remember the number exactly, but I was impressed with that. Not for myself, but just the fact that people, it kind of, reassures you in society that people do want this. They do want to be connected. They do want community. They do, appreciate that. And they brave this weather to come out to still have this time together. So, and the lights are kind of down. We have lights that go down onto the stage. So it's a really beautiful setting. And yeah, so.
Confirmation, right? When people show up despite sub-zero temperatures, that's confirmation that what you're doing is meaningful.
To them. Yeah.
And to you, right?
I mean, yeah, for sure.
For the community. I love that. I feel like I'm feeling that sensation with you of knowing that all those little details matter, but not in that moment, right? Leading up to it, all those details matter because when you're hosting an event, any event, it's all about those little details that make people feel like they belong there, that make people feel like they're being hosted. Whether they're paying for it doesn't matter. If you want people to feel that. Have you seen that in your work, it's much more likely people are going to be part of the community if they feel like they can contribute to it?
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's the essence of the work, right? Is that yes, we are individuals, but we are collective, right? So if you don't feed the collective, if you don't nurture the collective feels like
Won't
it has no
nurture
value,
you.
and it won't nurture exactly. It won't nurture you. So it's a give and take thing, and that's the essence of our work is give what you want to receive, right? That's our kind of our mantra is to give what you want to receive. So if you want community, you got to give community, right? If you want patience, you got to give. If you want respect, and so on, right? So yes, we are firm believers that you have to create, and I'm a visual person. I am a person that sees things before it's there. So it's like, I know that creating a space for people to feel like they belong there, like they're back at home, feel like they're in some type of warmth, right? Is so important. So that's why we go to every measure to make sure that the space is, what we kind of envision it to be. So people will feel welcomed. Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm feeling this sense of awe. And I don't know if you realize this, but one of the key aspects of my work as a storyteller is that I share stories with the intention of unlocking other people's stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you just shared that story, it reminded me of a moment where my son he's 23 now, but it was his 13th birthday, and we had his bar mitzvah, the Jewish coming of age ceremony,
Sure.
in Montana on his 13th birthday, which is unusual to have it right on his birthday, but it was Saturday. And he was born on the summer solstice, June 21st. And my father had passed away in February that same year. So he wasn't with us. And the whole day had been so bittersweet.
Yeah.
I mean, so grateful for the community. We don't have a large Jewish community in Helena. That is an understatement, by the way. And especially at that time. So of the 60 or so people that were at the bar mitzvah itself, maybe 10 of them were Jewish. And that was my family, right? The ones that came in from out of town and a handful that live here. And then when we had our reception, there were about 80 people. And again, maybe 10 or 12 of them were Jewish. And what I remember most was I brought out a birthday cake for Max, surprised him with it. He didn't know this was coming. And I announced to the group that I was bringing this out to sing happy birthday to him because he was so worried that we were going to forget that it was also his birthday because of all the excitement around his bar mitzvah. Yeah. And he described it as his birth mitzvah instead of bar mitzvah, which is so sweet.
Yeah.
And what I remember is this moment we're outside. It was starting to get dark and it's late. It's like 10 o'clock at night because it's Montana in June.
Yeah.
And so it's not even dark yet. And we brought out the cake and everyone started singing to Max the happy birthday song, which has never held a whole lot of sentimental value to me.
Right.
But hearing this entire community of like 80 people singing to him, I had this moment of awe at this collective energy.
Yeah.
What was being put out there focused on my kid.
Yeah.
So much love. And that's the memory that you awoke in me as you told me that story.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Wow. Imagine what he felt, right?
Oh, I know to this day he has that sense. He hasn't really talked about it, but he's that kind of kid. He would definitely be thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, thank you for listening. So now that we have kind of gotten into that feeling of awe that you experience at one of your events, at all of your events at different points, I'm sure.
Sure.
Now, maybe you can describe to our audience what the Breaking Bread Village is.
Sure. Yeah. So the Breaking Bread Village, just to let you know, kind of preface it with the fact that we started in 2020. And for me, anyway, when you hear 2020, you think you talking about awakened memories, right? I mean, you have so many things that took place during 2020. We had a presidential election that was kind of different than what we've had before. We had a pandemic. We had some social justice stuff going on with George Floyd incident. So it was all these different elements that I think really had people explosive and implosive, right? And so it was a lot happening. So me being a person I am, I'm observing and just watching. And so we need to have a space where people can talk about what they feel without any type of judgment, right? Because what I was finding on social media in spaces that people weren't allowed to come to family gatherings anymore. People weren't friends anymore. Couples were splitting up based on who they voted for. It was a lot of divisiveness. And I said, really, the problem is we're not talking to each other. We're not communicating and we're not willing to hear, right? So it was a mutual thing that was not taking place. And so that's where the Breaking Bread Village first kind of came from. And said, okay, we need to be able to sit down. We're adults. We can do this. I believe that we can. And we have the capability to sit down and have discussions. So that's where Breaking Bread Village kind of started. So what we do is I pick out people that are very different in thought, perspective, culture, background, experiences, and bring them together at a table. And we talk about hard topics. And I say hard just because it's some topics that are, I guess, considered taboo or people just don't talk about, right? People don't like to talk
controversial.
About. Yeah. So we talk about those things and we sit there for, we always have music. We always have live music because I believe music is a universal language that connects us all. We do have like some food or snacks, something to bring that part together, that element together. We have bright colors. All of our colors are pretty bright to just kind of show vibrancy, right? Because we are alive. We want to show that we are here to celebrate each other, not kind of mourn each other, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so then we have this conversation on people call it a panel, but we call it guests invited to the table because we try to liken the table to like a Sunday dinner or a family gathering or just that warm feeling that people feel when they get together around holidays or bar mitzvah, right? Things of that nature when you have food spread out. And so we have that discussion and then we invite the audience because we have an audience there as well. And they can join into the conversation, give some feedback, ask questions, and then we close with a little music and go home. So that's the core of the work we do. We do other stuff out in the community, but that's the core of our events, what we do.
So I love that for so many reasons. I mean, that's how I see my dining room table forever is that kind of conversation. But my question is, what changes have you seen as a result of it? Have you seen people really connecting authentically, changing their minds? Because I think one of the hardest things right now is people are so invested in their political identity that they don't feel like they can change their mind.
Mm. So I would like to say this. This is one thing that I feel makes us a little bit different, right? I don't go into any conversation with any expectation of change. Right? There's no expectation of change. I don't want people to come there with the idea that I'm trying to change you or you're going to try to change me, because I think that's where we fail like conversations, that we come in with an agenda of change, right?
Right. Exactly.
So instead, let's just come and talk, right? Now, what happens after that talk? It is totally up to us, right? And we have the power to make change or just listen. Sometimes it's just a matter of listening. We've had a number of people that still stayed very, very strong on their stance, but now they have empathy towards someone. So I'll give you a quick example. There was a gentleman who very, big on like guns, right? Having guns and, did not believe in like not having, some type of protection in his home. And then there was a lady who was very strongly against that. And what happened, this gentleman told a story about when he was younger and someone broke into their house. He was a small child. And his mother got violated based on these people breaking in. And he felt to this day like he was not able to defend his mother. He was a child. There was no expectation of him to defend his mother. But as a young boy, he felt like he was supposed to protect his mom and he was not able to. He felt like he failed at that. So he vowed that he would never allow something like that to happen again. So he keeps weapons in his home for defense, right? To be able to defend himself against intruders or his family, protect his family. He never wants to be that little boy again, because we know our childhood experiences shape us, right?
Yeah, and sense of helplessness.
Yes. So even though the lady still felt like she never wanted guns in her home, she understood his how and why. And that's what I feel the importance of our work is not Now change is great, right? If people decide to change, I mean, I applaud that. If you want to evolve and grow, because we should always be trying to grow and evolve. But in that moment, she was able to at least have empathy, right? And understanding, compassion towards him, and not look at him as this monster because this is what he chose, but because, oh, something happened to him and this is a cause and effect of that. So we have those kind of stories. We have, I had a lady that we had a story, a conversation about agreeing to disagree. And instead of agree to disagree being the ending, because usually when we say agree to disagree, that's like, I don't want to talk to you about it again. Let's leave it there. Right. Instead of it being that, look at it as a beginning to another conversation. Right. So we had that talk. And there was a lady who had not spoken to her brother for 2 years because of who he voted for in the election some years ago. And after that show, she reached out to her brother because she realized, I love my brother, right? I don't want to not speak to my brother for the rest of my life. So there has to be a way for us to find some kind of balance in this life so we can show up at dinners again together and family gatherings. So we have situations like that because I strategically place people at a table together, and you have people that would never be in the same spaces together or talk together that end up later going to have coffee, exchanging phone numbers, becoming Facebook friends so they can learn more about this person. So that's the ripple effect that I truly enjoy, seeing that organic and just realistic way of change, right? That I may not change everything I feel about myself, but I could at least change my approach to people, the way I judge people, the way I, interact with people.
I love that. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Oh,
that is exactly the kind of impact that I was hoping to hear about. And you're right. It's not about changing someone's mind, but it is about change.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a really important distinction. Hearing somebody's personal story about why they believe what they believe changes you, even if it doesn't make you suddenly a big supporter of people owning weapons. It definitely changes you in how you, as you said, how you approach those conversations. Yeah. And I think where we really get stuck is we forget to ask those questions. We just make a decision. As I said in the beginning, we kind of anchor people in time in a particular light that we see them once. So one post or one conversation, and we've decided they are this kind of person without understanding any of the other context behind our complexity as human beings.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true.
I love that. And thank you for sharing those particular stories, because those are exactly the kind of impact stories that we need to be listening to.
Yeah.
Particularly about finding some middle ground with your family, because the moment we cut off that relationship is the moment we lose our potential for fixing the problems that we're experiencing today.
Yeah. And it impacts us, I mean, people don't understand when we cut off other people, we're cutting off a part of ourselves as well. And we don't realize that it is an exchange that's taking place. And so we have to think about that. Am I really willing to die on this hill for this, and I get some things you have to make a strong stance on. I totally understand that and get that to the depths of my heart. But some things we can still feel strongly about it and pass the bread, right? I think we can still do that. We build, and that's part of our kind of foundational principles also, is, building emotional intelligence, intellectual humility, and realizing that it's okay for us to believe what we believe and also honor what somebody else believes. Even when we think about religion, right? I mean, there are different ways that people go to get to their belief, right, system, right? That's what they believe. And it's not for me to say they're wrong. If I believe something different, I can share that without putting down what they believe. And I think that once we learn how to do that, we grow as a person individually, but then also as a collective. So.
Yeah. What are you thinking in terms of how we scale this? Because it's not going to happen on social media. I mean, I just today unfollowed somebody. I didn't unfriend them, but I unfollowed somebody because I realized every time I see his posts, it makes me sad that he is thinking the way that he's thinking, and a little angry. And so I don't want to see his posts anymore because they're not his story. They're his opinions. And so how do we scale this? I mean, I have my own ideas, but I want to hear your ideas in terms of scaling this because, again, it's not going to happen on social media. We're not going to be able to reconnect in the same way on social media.
And when you say how do we scale it, like in regards to just person to person?
Having the impact of being able to agree to disagree as the beginning of a conversation instead the end of it.
You know, for me, I am a person to person, if that makes sense, right?
Yes.
I want to sit down with you, have coffee, have tea. I want you to look at me. I want me to be able to look at you, for you to be able to see that I'm not angry, right? To be able to gauge the tone, because as we know, text, email, social media, so much gets misconstrued because people read it with their voice. They read it with their thoughts. They read it with their emotions. And so you could write something one way and 5 different people will read it differently based on their experiences. They have defensiveness against what is being said, right? So I found that is not a good way to try to get messaging out. Now, some people have found success in that. Some people have, social media pages that bring tons of people together. And I word things a certain way, but I don't go to the depths of having back and forth dialogue, because what I found is that it's not fruitful. So what I do is I may say something there and then say, hey, if you want to meet, if you want to talk, if you want to gather. Matter of fact, today I just had an idea. I said, you know what? I'm going to create a space and hold space for people this Monday. It was not planned. And said, you know what? Come to the library. They have a little community room there. Let's just get together and hold space for each other, because people are going through a lot of uncertainties right now and some heaviness. And just come, just build community that way and let's talk. Can we do it on social media? I don't think so, right? We have to be in the space of each other. So for me, is being brave enough, bold enough to invite someone in, right? And say, you know what? I don't have all the answers, but I can hold space for you, right? I can listen. You can vent. We can talk, whatever it is. And then hopefully I can too. And we can both be that for each other. And then hopefully come to some type of, have some type of resolution and some things. And then some things we know you just can't, because you don't have the power to change it, but you can hold space. And that's where, for me, that's the important work that I do. And I think that we all have different parts to play in this. So one person's mission is not the same as someone else. Somebody else is a organizer, and somebody else is just a person that, hey, I'll cook some food and invite everybody over. We can play video games or card games or whatever it is, right? And so everybody plays their part. And I think when we operate in that space where we understand that we don't have to do all the things, but the one thing that we can do, the few things we can do them well, do them with intention, do them with passion and love. And that's, to me, how you cause those ripple effects of change. Sorry, that was kind of long, but.
No, that was perfect. It was so perfect. Completely agree. I mean, all of what you said is so important. And as I mentioned, I have some of my own ideas. And what I'm hearing you say is that the most important thing is to leave that space open, that you are not going to judge somebody for their post online or whatever. You're going to invite them to have a conversation. And I think it's so critical that we reach out to people. So as an example, I gave public testimony against a bill that's very discriminatory here in Montana. And I basically said that we have much bigger problems. We have Helena, Montana, this little town, is the least affordable city in the country right now for housing. Our housing went up by 45%.
Oh, wow.
Which is more than anywhere else in the country. And so there are people that are not able to find a place to live here. And my elder son and his wife are too, that are looking, because their rent when their property was sold, their rent went from $800 to $1,700 a month.
My goodness. Wow.
Yeah. And there's no way to do that. So my testimony was, let's work on these problems first and fix problems that exist already.
Yeah.
And the sponsor of the bill got up and spoke right after me, and she was very defensive. My bill is important because blah, blah, blah. And I realized I really insulted her, which part of me is okay with that, given the scenario. At the same time, I realized that maybe there's room here because she was defensive. If somebody's defensive, it means that there's room for something.
Sure.
Something is niggling at her. So I wrote her an email and said, I noticed that I insulted you, and let's go have coffee. I want to hear about how much you care for your community. And of course, she hasn't responded. But just putting it out there made me feel like I was doing something.
You did your part. That's all people can do is do their part. We cannot fix everything. We can't fix everybody. And some people don't want to be fixed. Some people may not need to be fixed. Maybe it's us too. Maybe we need to be fixed. Maybe we need to see it differently. It's so many different variables. So at the end of the day, you do what you can. And once I extend, and this may sound a little harsh, but this is truly what I live by. Once I extend an olive branch, if the person burns it, I let the ashes fall where they may, right? I just let them fall. And that's just where I am in life, right? It's
Thank you for saying that.
I
needed to hear that right now.
What's the alternative? Staying up every night, thinking about it, spending energy like, hey, I tried, right? Mm-hmm. And as you know, the more we live in life, we realize that there's misunderstandings all the time. People just misunderstand what your intentions were. They misunderstand your words, your actions, and you can only try to explain a handful of times. At that point, you have to leave them where they are, and that's something that's hard. It's something that you have to kind of grieve. Grieving living people is one of the hardest things that you can do. For me anyway. But sometimes I've learned that that's something that has to happen. So yeah, I let the ashes fall where they may. And again, I know sometimes that sounds a little, but it's the truth, right? If you try to do it and they burn that, it's like you talk about burning bridges. What can you do?
Right. We have to set that boundary to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. There are some aspects of those boundaries that have to be solid.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you were going to speak to about 1,000 people today, what would you want to say?
Oh, well, I will say, when I do talk to people, I do that. And when I go and have these talks, I talk about the heart of leadership, right? And what that looks like. And for me, people look at leadership as like a CEO or a business owner. Leadership is leading within your community, leading within yourself, right? So this idea that, holding a door open for someone is an act of leadership, right? And showing who you are and having that type of heart and compassion for your neighbor. So going back to the heart, I think that a lot of times when we do all the stuff that we do, right now it's so much happening in the world, these constant changes. And I think that people are just unable to keep up. They just don't know. It's a lot of uncertainty. So with that said, going back to that heart, okay, am I going to show up angry? Am I going to be fatigued every day? Am I going to be upset, or am I going to just breathe? Right? Am I going to look for community? Am I going to reach out? Am I going to try to go back to the heart part of me and not just the defensiveness, the anger? We have to go back to that heart part. So that's what I would talk about. I would talk about finding your heart, finding where you have to go. And if you are fatigued, sit down. Sit down. It's okay to sit down. You don't have to keep going. That's why you have community, because when one person needs to sit down, somebody else can hold you up. They can stand in the place for you until you're well again, and you can't. So I think a lot of that, just self-care, going back to the humanities and going back to our heart, having compassion and empathy for each other and for ourselves, being patient with ourselves is something that I would talk about for sure. Yeah.
I love that. Listeners, you can follow what Erin Patrice is putting out there. All of her content is available to you, and the links will be in the show notes associated with this podcast episode at elkinsconsulting.com. Erin, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. I really appreciate your time, your energy, and the love that you exude for all of us, but particularly for your community that you serve.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate you for having me. It's been great. This is the kind of conversation you can just keep on having, right? Go on.
Absolutely. More and more of them, because we need to hear this. We need to hear the love. We need to hear the boundary setting. We need to hear take care of yourself, because you can't take care of anybody else if you're not taking care of yourself. We need to hear those messages over and over again.
Yeah.
So
Well, thank you.
thank you. Listeners, it's your turn. What are you going to take from this conversation? Who will you reach out to go and have a cup of coffee, not with the intention of changing their mind, but with the intention of listening to their story? Find out what matters to them and have a conversation. I would love to hear what happens for you when you choose to step up and step in. Thanks for listening to Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will.
Keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.